Today's lesson is 7.5, and the essential question for today is how do you classify triangles based on their properties? Alright, here we go. Let's warm up a little bit this morning for our first mental math. So the problem you see in front of you is 45 divided by 10 to the something power is equal to 4.5 or 4.5. Think about that for a second, and hopefully you're going to put a 1 in there, so that it's 45 divided by 10 to the power. So that 45 is going to move one spot from where it originally was there over to there. So that's our first mental math problem. Here's our second problem. Notice this is a multiplication problem, so hopefully you're saying to yourself, okay, if division went to the left, multiplication is going to go to the right when I'm multiplying by powers of 10. So I start at 3.12 and I've got to go over that way. What's the power there that's going to make that decimal move 2 spots? Oh, 2 spots. Oh, so it's to the power of 2. Excellent. Very, very good. Here's our third problem. 6.5 divided by blank is equal to 0.065 or 65 thousandths. So 10 to the what power is going to get me there? So I know it's a 10. I just have to think of the power now of how to get it there. And the way I do this is I start where my decimal is. So it's right here in between the 6 and the 5, and I'm going to go 2 spots. So I know that it's 10 to the second power again. Okay, here's your last problem. 97 divided by blank is equal to 97 hundredths. Again, I'm going to start my decimal where my original problem is, and I'm going to go here and here, so I know that it's going to be again 10 to the second power. Now that you're warmed up, let's get into the lesson. So you may be asking yourself, what is that word hierarchies in the essential question? The definition of hierarchies is to show relationships among categories and subcategories. While you're thinking about that, I need you to cut out the set of triangles which are found in the bin outside our classroom. Look in the folder that says 7.5 on it. Here's a set of triangles that I took the time to cut out myself. I would like for you to pause the video at this time and take a couple of minutes and sort the triangles however you think they would fit into different categories. You decide. Pause the video at this time. I'd like to point out a couple of things to you here with these triangles. And the first thing I'd like to point out to you is that there are these tick marks here. And I'm going to circle this triangle right here. And notice that there are 2 tick marks on the one side and 2 tick marks on the other side. And that is basically letting us know that those 2 sides that have the same tick marks are equal in length. So that would be 2 sides on that triangle that are equal in length. This triangle right next to it here has tick marks on all 3 sides, so that would signify that that triangle has 3 sides that are the same length as well. If I look at one more triangle over here, this triangle that I'm circling, this triangle has 3 different tick marks, but you notice that they're all different. There's a 1 tick mark, there's a 2 tick mark, and there's a 3 tick mark. So if we zoom in on that a little bit there, that signifies that all 3 of those sides are different in size, or different in length. So those are not equal at all. So that's one thing that I wanted to point out to you. The other thing I just wanted to remind you of is some of the triangles also have this little box here in some of the triangles. And there's one, and here's another one. So there are 2 spots there, and remember there are a couple others. Those are what signify a right triangle, and right triangles, remember, are 90 degrees for that particular angle, so that's where those 2 angles meet, equal to 90 degrees. Now that we know a little bit more about tick marks, how did you sort your triangles? What categories did you put them into? Did you know that certain things were categorized because of the attribute of that triangle or the property? That means that it's a particular thing that belongs to that particular triangle. If you think about your own attributes, some of us have brown hair, some of us have blonde hair, some of us have gray hair. That's me. But we all have different attributes based upon our hair color. We also have different eye colors, different size shoes. These are all attributes of ourselves. So let's think about this as we move forward in this lesson. Before we get started back with our triangles, I wanted to explain a little bit about this idea of hierarchies. Hierarchies are basically going to be different categories. And in this first category I have all the way at the top in the red box, I have students in my class. So I could simply list every student in my class if I wanted to. I could go with Logan and Kelly and Layla and Aubrey and Jacob and Dylan and Tyler and Chloe and Nathan and Ryan and Bridget and Riley and Dylan and Riley and Annabelle and Justin and Nathan and Aiden and Ella and Austin and Lexi and Amanda and Mason and Jonas. So I've listed all of my students in my class, all 24 of them. Oh, I forgot one, Bethany, 25. So all 25 of my students in my class. Now, of those 25 students, I'm only going to look at the ones that have a sibling in my class. So I'm looking down there, and some of the students in my class that are in my class that also have a sibling. So Aubrey has a sibling, and I know that because I had Aubrey sibling. So Aubrey has a sibling. And if I keep moving down, let's see, Chloe has siblings. So I know that for a fact. And some of these other folks may have siblings and I just don't know it. I know Ryan has a sibling. And you can see where I'm going here. Not all of them have siblings though. Riley Rohr, one of my newer students, he has siblings. And I'll go with one more. I'm going to say that Jonas has a sibling as well. Now, some of the other students in my class maybe don't have any siblings. I'm going to say that, let's see, Annabelle does not have any siblings. So I'm going to leave Annabelle up here in the top category. She's an only child. Now, I'm looking at this group of students here that is in this category. They're in this category, but if we go down one more subcategory, students in my class with a sibling who is a brother. So I look at all these students here, and I don't think any of them, oh, maybe Aubrey. I'm going to take a guess and say that Aubrey has a brother. All right, so she's not only in this category, but she's also down here in this category as well. So she got a little bit more specific here. And don't quote me on that because I'm not positive that Aubrey has a brother, but we used it as an example. All right, so hierarchies. Let's look at one more example. First category in this hierarchy is going to be exactly the same. Students in my class, so everybody goes into that category. As we move down one, now we're going to go with students in my class who have a pet. Any pet, doesn't matter, as long as it's a pet. It could be a goldfish, it could be a parrot, a hamster, a dog, a cat, anything that is categorized as a pet. Some students may not have pets, so they're going to stay up top in that first category. Last but not least in this hierarchy, we're going to go with students in my class who have a dog. If you don't have a dog but you have a pet, you're going to stay up here in this category. But if you have that four-legged friend, you're moving on down into this category. So we're going to have students in all three categories of this hierarchy. Very general or basic in the top category and getting more specific as we move down the hierarchy. Now that you have a basic understanding of hierarchies when we took a look at our class, let's go back to those triangles you cut out earlier in the math message. How could we put them into hierarchies? Let's turn to page 246 and work together on our first hierarchy with triangles. Here we are on page 246 in our math journal, and we're going to look at our triangles that we cut out earlier in this lesson. So let's think about this for a second. Our first category in our triangles, or our hierarchy of triangles, is going to be exactly that, triangles. So our first category over here is going to be triangles. So we're going to stick that over here. So now that we have triangles as our first category, we have to think, okay, of all those triangle cards, which cards are going to go into that category? Did you say all the triangles? Yeah, I think so too. So let's take a look at that, and we're going to insert these triangles here so that all of the triangles go into this first category. So we know that the hierarchy here is all of these triangles. If we look at all these triangles in this first category, I'm going to ask you, what properties do all these triangles share? You're correct if you said that all of them have 3 sides and also 3 angles. Now let's go on to our next category, a little bit more specific here. So we're going to go down in our triangle hierarchy, but we're going to look at our triangle cards in our first category. And I want you to pay close attention to the tick marks in those categories. So think about that for a second. What could we do in this next category? I'm going to come up with isosceles triangles. And isosceles triangles are those triangles that have how many sides that are equal? Remember, the definition of isosceles triangles means that at least 2 sides are the same. Could it be 3? It certainly could. So some of these triangles in the first category have been brought down now into the second category. So all of these triangles over here in the second category that are labeled isosceles triangle are those that have at least 2 sides that are equal. And I know that because of those tick marks that we see there. Okay, our last category here that we've got to become a little bit more specific on, we've got to look at those triangles in that second category over here. So if we look at those triangles, some of them have 2 sides that are equal, some of them that have 3 sides that are equal. So my third category is going to deal exactly with that. It's going to deal with an equilateral triangle. And hopefully you remember that equilateral triangles are those triangles that have all 3 sides that are equal. So there are my 3 triangles that are equilateral triangles. They still belong up in the isosceles triangle category, and they still also are part of the triangle category that we first began with, but we slowly broke them down into the different properties that were associated with them. Now that we have finished this page, I'd like for you to take all but 2 triangles. Take 2 triangles out of your math journal and put them to the side. Okay, so you've got 2 triangles to the side. I want you to glue the rest of the triangles into the correct hierarchy. So you have some triangles at the top category, some in the isosceles, and some in the equilateral. But you have 2 to the side because we're going to need those for the next math journal page. Here we are on page 247, and you can see there I have my 2 triangles that I did not glue into my math journal on page 246. We're going to use those to answer this first question here. So thinking back to the 3 categories we did on page 246, I want you to come up with one of the 3 categories to take for, let's use this first triangle here. Okay, so my category that I'm going to come up with is going to be an isosceles triangle. Does that first triangle fit into that category of the isosceles triangle? It most certainly does. Now I've got to think of a subcategory or another category that's going to go in there, or hierarchy. So for that particular one, I'm thinking about my equilateral triangles. This triangle, first triangle, does indeed have 3 sides that are equal, so the properties are there, that it would qualify for an equilateral triangle. So I would not only have it in my isosceles category, but I'd also have it in my equilateral category. So now I need to take a look at that second triangle that I also had down there. So does that fit into the isosceles triangle category? It doesn't, does it? Okay, so let's think of a new category for that triangle. That's basic, a triangle. So that category for that particular triangle basically is going to go into the triangle category. Would it fit into the equilateral triangle category or hierarchy? No. What about the isosceles triangle? If I look, there's no tick marks there, so that tells me that all 3 sides, or the properties of that triangle, mean that all 3 of them are not equal in length. So that particular triangle is just going to stay up there in my triangle category. So think about what we've just worked on. The rest of this page should be pretty easy for you if you think back to those things that we talked about. Okay, so think back to everything that we worked on here in this lesson, and that should really, really help you figure out the rest of this page. Now that you've finished this lesson, you have a couple more things to do prior to moving on to 7.6. The first thing you need to do is finish and start and complete page 248, which is math boxes for 7.5. Then you need to go out into the bin in between our two classrooms and grab home link 7.5 and be sure it says 7.5 at the top of it. Once you have finished that and turned that into your teacher, then you are ready to move on to 7.6.